On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and a couple of documents surfaced detailing a project called Project NachtWandler. It was a secret East German program that experimented on less valuable people to turn them into super soldiers. About 30 years later, Mark Schneider found the documents. And what was in those documents is utterly horrific. I never thought rummaging through my grandfather's attic after his passing would turn my weekend into a dive down a rabbit hole I'm not sure I can climb out of. It all started with a dusty box labeled the Cold War, which I guess makes sense since my grandfather was all about that history junk. Inside, among old newspapers and some medals, was a folder labeled Project NachtWandler, Project Nightwalker in English. It looked official. It was stuffed with papers, some yellowed with age. The papers talked about experiments and other stuff that made my stomach churn. Stuff about injecting people with strange chemicals and subjecting them to torture, trying to make them into soldiers that didn't feel pain or fear. It was messed up. The next couple of days I couldn't shake off what I'd read. I started Googling, trying to see if there was anything out there about it. There wasn't much, just a few conspiracy forums where people talked about all kinds of crazy experiments during the Cold War, but nothing solid on Project Nightwalker. That's when I decided to do something about it. Not sure why, really. Maybe I felt like these stories, these people, needed someone to talk about them, to tell their stories. I'm no writer or historian, but I figured I could at least try to find out more. If it turned out to be real, that is. I hit up the library first. The librarian, Mrs. Schmidt, gave me that look like, what's Mark up to now? But helped me dig through old newspapers and microfilms. Nothing. It was like this Project Nightwalker never existed. That got me thinking. Maybe I was looking in the wrong place. This was East German stuff after all. So, I reached out to my history professor at my local college, Dr. Weiss. Told him what I found and asked if he knew anything about it. Dr. Weiss went pale when I mentioned the project's name. He didn't say much, just that it was a dark chapter in history, best left alone. But he did give me a name, Karl Muller. A survivor, or so he thought. Dr. Weiss warned me, though, said some stones are better left unturned. I didn't listen. Couldn't, I guess. My mind was set on finding out everything about Project Nightwalker. Tracking down Karl Muller wasn't easy. Took me weeks of phone calls, emails, and even a letter or two. Finally, I got a hit. An address in a small town about 3 hours away. No phone number, just an address. So, I did what any sane person would do. I took a road trip. The town was one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and strangers stick out like sore thumbs. I found the address after asking around a bit. It was a small house at the edge of the town, looking like it had seen better days. I knocked, half expecting no one to answer, but the door creaked open, and there he was. Karl Muller. He looked old, but his eyes were sharp. He looked me over, then stepped aside to let me in without saying a word. His house was like stepping into the past. Old furniture, photographs on the walls, and a faint smell of tobacco. He led me to the living room, gestured for me to sit, and then he just started talking. No, hello. No, what do you want? He dove right into it, like he'd been expecting me. Karl was in his mid-20s when they took him in 1963. He and others from his village were rounded up and sent to a facility. He didn't know where. They were told they were chosen to serve their country, to be part of something important. But it was a lie. All of it. The experiments started almost immediately. They were injected with a chemical they called XOV557. Some reacted violently, their bodies changing, twisting into something else. Others went mad, screaming, clawing at their face and body until they were nothing but a pile of bloody meat laying dead on the floor. Carl was one of the lucky ones. His body didn't change much, but the things he saw, the things he experienced, they left marks no one could see. He talked about friends he lost to the experiments, about the screams that filled the nights and the silence that followed. It was like the air itself was heavy with sorrow and pain. I could see it weighed on him, sharing these memories, but he kept talking. I didn't know what to say when he finished. What do you say to something like that? I'm sorry seemed too small, too simple for the depth of horror he'd lived through. So I just listened, nodded, and let him talk until he had no more words left. The sun was setting when I left Carl's house. The drive back was quiet, just me and my thoughts, and a growing sense of unease. What Carl told me was just the beginning. I knew that. There was more to Project Nightwalker, more horrors hidden in the shadows of history. I got home late, too wired to sleep. I sat in the dark, going over everything Carl had said, and I made a decision. I was going to find out everything about Project Nightwalker, no matter where it took me or what I had to do. These stories, these lives, they deserve to be known. I don't know why I became so obsessed with the project. To this day, I still can't answer that. And that's where I'm at now. At the beginning of something I can't fully see yet. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, knowing you have to jump, but not knowing where you'll land. But I have to jump. I have to know. After meeting with Carl, my head was spinning. Not just from his story, but from the realization that there was so much more to uncover about Project Nightwalker. Carl had given me a piece of the puzzle, but it was up to me to put the rest together. So, I did what anyone obsessed with uncovering a hidden truth would do. I dug deeper. I went through the public library's archives again, sifting through old newspapers and records, anything that might have a shred of information. Most days I came up empty-handed, but I kept at it, fueled by Carl's story and a growing sense of responsibility to bring the truth to light. One day, I hit a breakthrough. I found a small article buried in an old newspaper from 1989, right around the time the Berlin Wall fell. It mentioned a government facility being shut down, a place where special research had been conducted. The article didn't say much, but it listed a location, a small town near the border, now abandoned. I knew I had to see it for myself. Packing a bag with the essentials, I drove out to the location. The town was exactly as described, abandoned, with nature slowly reclaiming the buildings and streets. The facility was on the outskirts, a large, imposing building behind a rusted gate. Pushing past my apprehension, I climbed over the gate and made my way inside. The place was a wreck, with debris and papers scattered everywhere. It felt like stepping into a time capsule, a snapshot of a day when everything suddenly stopped. As I explored, I found rooms that looked like dormitories, others filled with strange, rusting equipment. The air was thick with dust and decay, but it was the silence that got to me. I found documents, more evidence of the experiments, lists of names, dates, procedures that made my skin crawl. It was all real. Project Nightwalker wasn't just a chapter in history. It was a nightmare that had been lived by real people. I took photos, gathered up as much evidence as I could carry, and left, the weight of what I'd found pressing down on me. But it was what I found in a room down in the basement that changed everything. It was an archive, records and tapes that detailed not just the experiments, but their purpose. They weren't just trying to create super soldiers. They were trying to create something beyond humans. Beings capable of surviving any environment, any situation. And according to the records, they had succeeded. Driving back, I knew I had to do something. The story needed to be told, not just for the sake of the past, but for the future. People needed to know what had been done, what could still be out there. I started writing, compiling everything I had into a coherent narrative. But this wasn't about crafting the perfect story. It was about getting the truth out there. I contacted newspapers, history blogs, and anyone who would listen. Most didn't believe me. Some accused me of concocting a conspiracy theory. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Then things started to get weird. My emails started bouncing back. Calls went unanswered. It was like someone was systematically cutting off my attempts to communicate. I even found my car tampered with one morning. It was subtle, but clear. Someone wanted me to stop. But the real wake-up call came one night when I found a note pinned to my door. "Stop looking," it read. Nothing else, just those 2 words, but they were enough. I realized then that I was in over my head. This wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about stirring up a hornet's nest that had been left undisturbed for too long. I wish I could tell you I pressed on, fearless and determined, but I didn't. I was scared, not just for myself, but for my family, for Carl, for anyone connected to this story. So I stopped. I buried the evidence, deleted the photos, and tried to forget. But you can't unsee the things I've seen. You can't unknow the truths I've uncovered. It's been months since I walked away, but not a day goes by that I don't think about Project Nightwalker, about the people who suffered, about what might still be out there. Sometimes, late at night, I think about starting again, about finishing what I started. But then I remember the note, the silence, and the fear, so I stay quiet, telling myself it's for the best. But here I am, writing this down. Maybe it's a way of letting go, or maybe it's a way of holding on. I'm not sure. All I know is that Project Nightwalker is real, and I beg of you to not go looking, for your own safety. For more scary horror stories, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. If you are interested in supporting me and my work, you can always check out my Patreon. There you will get ad-free stories in video and audio format, 2 days early access to my weekly stories, and you'll get to give me special requests on ideas and stories you would like me to read. Thank you for your love and support.